Great. Good morning and congratulations, Connecticut, on making it to the national finals. That's a tremendous accomplishment. And I know it was a lot of work, especially in this very challenging school year. So I definitely appreciate everything you did to get here. My name is Ben Glickman. I'm an attorney with the California Attorney General's Office. I'm also an alumnus of this program. I was in the national finals way back in 1995, long before Zoom.
I'm Hank Chambers, law professor, University of Richmond. Been at this for a while. Saw you guys before, at least your general team before. So good to see you, and I'm sure we'll have a good conversation this morning.
And my name is David Hudson. I'm a First Amendment fellow with the Freedom Forum Institute, and I teach law at Belmont in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm glad to be here.
You'd introduce yourselves and your teacher.
Good morning, judges. We are Unit 5. Our unit focuses on the Bill of Rights. My name is Rachel, and this fall I will be attending Northwestern University studying theater.
Hi, I'm Joelle, and this fall I'll be studying environmental engineering at Northeastern University in Boston.
Good morning, my name is Madeline, and I'll also be attending Northeastern University to study political science, but this fall I'll spend a semester at the New College of the Humanities in London. But for now, we're all seniors at Trumbull High School. This is our teacher, Miss Bolin, and we thank you for being here today.
Great. Thank you very much. And we'll get going here in a second. I'll read the question. If we manage to stump you, just hold real still and we'll think Zoom froze. All right. All right. If you're ready, we'll read it. Your question today is number 1. A result of the decision in Wisconsin v. Yoder is that any parent guardian can refuse to let their child go to school beyond the 8th grade or learn about a subject by saying it's against their religious beliefs. Do you agree or disagree with the result of this decision? Why or why not? What words, if any, are found in the U.S. Constitution or in state constitutions that protect the right to an education? How have courts balanced religious beliefs with other rights? Whenever you're ready.
In 1972, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Yoder, finding that although Wisconsin's compulsory education statute was reasonable and constitutional, its application to members of the Amish Mennonite Church was not. Justice Douglas, however, filed a partial dissent, arguing that the children themselves should be given the choice on whether to continue their secular education.
I agree with the majority decision in Yoder, which upheld the supremacy of the rights listed in the Bill of Rights over the right to an education. As said by William Penn, no person can be truly happy, though under the greatest enjoyment of civil liberties, if abridged of the freedom of their consciences.
I, like Justice Douglas, believe that children have the right to decide for themselves whether they prioritize their freedom of religion or their education. Children are recognized by the Constitution as persons, and therefore are entitled to the same fundamental rights as adults, thus giving them the freedom to choose for themselves.
However, limiting subjects taught in schools on the basis of religion, as seen in the Scopes trial in Tennessee, has been problematic. In Epperson v. Arkansas in 1968, the court unanimously struck down an Arkansas law that criminalized the teaching of evolution in public schools. Today, we see the tension, with 7 states having enacted legislation that prohibits the teaching of LGBTQ+ inclusive sexual education in public schools under Christian principles, stating that homosexuality is not a lifestyle acceptable to the general public.
Although nowhere enumerated in the Constitution, the court stated in San Antonio Individual School District versus Rodriguez that the right to education has been viewed by the framers as a right essential to a healthy democracy. From the very first establishment of public schools, education has been entangled with religion.
The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 states that religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government, schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. Though the ordinance acted as a model for the Bill of Rights in many aspects, this guarantee of a free public education for all was not discussed at the Philadelphia Convention.
The U.S. Constitution is silent on education, but every state constitution includes language that mandates the establishment of a public education system. Some include clauses that only stipulate the state provide public education, while other states, like Florida, have taken more significant measures to ensure that education is high quality.
The Constitution was not silent on the issue of religion. Article 6 of the Constitution and 12 words of the First Amendment are devoted to the protection of religious liberty. However, as with all rights, this right is not absolute.
In Reynolds versus United States in 1879, the court created a belief-action distinction, as it held that the federal government cannot interfere with a person's religious beliefs, except for when a religious practice violates notions of health, safety, and morality.
In Employment Division of Oregon versus Smith in 1990, the court challenged religious free exercise law by ruling that generally applicable laws not targeting specific religious practices do not violate the free exercise clause of the First Amendment.
Perhaps one of the most widely referenced religious freedom cases is Lemon versus Kurtzman from 1971. The court reasoned that all laws must be religiously neutral, maintaining a secular purpose. Any law that fails to do so is subject to the Lemon test, a form of strict scrutiny that ensures no excessive government entanglement with religion.
This past November, the Supreme Court heard a case that pits LGBTQ+ rights against religious rights in Fulton County versus Philadelphia. At issue is whether government-funded foster care agencies have the right to discriminate based on religious beliefs. Like Yoder, this case will have broad implications past the foster care context, this time being anti-discrimination statutes.
Thank you. We're now ready for your questions.
Great, thank you. So let's pick up right there at the end. You mentioned Oregon v. Smith, you mentioned the Lemon test. Is there a point where protecting free exercise bumps up or begins to violate the Establishment Clause? And how do you reconcile those two constitutional interests?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi just cut out.
No, no worries. Please give them a few extra seconds for that. My question is, does protecting free exercise, being too protective of religious freedom, does that end up bumping up against the Establishment Clause if you are giving too much leeway to freedom of religion at the expense of secular interests?
So I personally believe that in Tandem versus Newsom, which was very recently decided this past March in California, that what it did was grant far too much leeway to religion. What was at stake was there was a California law that said that there would be no more than 3 families gathering together. However, a few more than that, gathered together to try and practice in Bible study. So although this law did not go against the Lemon test because it was applicable to everyone in every family, the court did rule in favor of those 3 families. So I believe that this is a clear-cut case of religion versus our own rights going against each other, and proving the difference between common good versus what we can do as a society, especially in times of crisis.
We also see the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause come into conflict with schools. If we look at Santa Fe Independent School District versus Department of Education in 2000, a student would broadcast an overtly Christian prayer over the loudspeakers before home football games. When there was outcry against this, they changed the prayer so it would be non-denominational and optional whether students wanted to partake in it. But the government still said it violated the Establishment Clause and Free Exercise because it was endorsed by a public school on public property, and that's unconstitutional for it to be endorsed because it violates the Lemon test.
I believe that the court's decision in Reynolds versus United States established that precedent that we've used for the past century in determining that balance between secular interest and the free exercise of religion. That precedent of certain notions of health, safety, and morality being violated in free exercise has been applied to many cases, including cases related to vaccination and religious free exercise exemptions. Particularly Jacobson versus Massachusetts was balancing that interest in eradicating smallpox, which we have successfully done as humanity's species, versus the religious exemptions requested to reject the vaccine. And the court decided that eradicating this disease and avoiding the outbreak of smallpox was of such importance to public health that it was worth it to restrict that fundamental right to the free exercise of religion.
You mentioned the Lemon test. Justice Scalia once famously disparaged it as, quote, a nightmarish ghoul that still stalks our Establishment Clause jurisprudence. Do you think the Lemon test is an appropriate way to analyze whether something violates the principle of church-state separation?
I do not. I actually disagree with the decision that was made in Lemon. The case involved a local government that was providing direct monetary funding to its parochial schools to reimburse them for their secular education. And based off of the decision in Lemon, the court allowed that to continue, saying that directly giving money to these religiously affiliated schools was not a violation of the Establishment Clause because of the three-pronged test. It did not either promote or inhibit religion. But I would argue that it absolutely is promoting religion, because even if you're giving money to this private school for a specific purpose, they're using their other funding for their religious teachings. And if you have extra funding for education, I believe that should go to your public and secular schools to strengthen those programs.
I have to partially agree with Joelle on this one. So although there have been some decisions that have been made under the Lemon Test, such as Butler County versus Smith, that I cannot agree with just because it's allowing more leeway for religion and for teaching of religion, even though that did restrict what the school was attempting to do in that case, I do believe that there are definitely parts of the Lemon Test that should be reformed. And I believe that we can do this by just changing it and updating it to today's standards. Because we have seen time and time again that this has worked and that we have allowed cases to stay intact. We mentioned Jacobson, but there's a sister case to Jacobson, Zucht versus King, which also allows for no religious exemptions in public or private schools. And today we see that in California with, in 2015, the passage of Senate Bill 277, which was to go against the measles outbreak in Disney World, which was then not allowing any religious exemptions in public or private schools. So I believe that this has been effective when it comes to safeguarding things, especially in terms of our common good and in terms of our general welfare.
I actually have to disagree with my colleagues, Rachel and Joelle. I think the Lemon Test is pretty effective in its protection of religious freedom and freedom from being forced, having religion forced upon you. If you look at the case of Lynch versus Donnelly in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, there was a display that a church had put out with baby Jesus and Santa just for the holidays. And the court ruled that the display was not an effort to advocate or push a particular religious message. And because it had a legitimate secular purpose, and it didn't violate the Establishment Clause. And this is why you're allowed to display your own religious beliefs in your home and at church without being told that you can't.
Let's go back to Yoder for a moment. At what point should a child be able to make a choice that trumps the parent's right to guide the child's life and behavior?
So I personally disagree with the decision in Yoder, which was that 14 and 15-year-olds should be able to do that at the 8th grade level. I personally believe that it should be around 16 years old because that is the age of consent. That is when we see the government saying, yes, you can make these choices for yourself. That is also the age where it's very common or more common amongst emancipation rates to get emancipated from your parents. I believe that once we start giving kids these rights, that's also the age where it comes to, in many states, kids being able to drive. I believe that this is about a better age than what is said in Yoder. However, the ruling in Yoder was put there because the court decided that those 2 additional years of schooling would not impact the children to that far of an extent. So I do have to agree with that reasoning. I would just push it up by 2 years so that it's a little bit older.
I also think it's important to note that the decision in Yoder was unanimous. The Amish are the 300-year-old established religion with good faith in the public and sincerely held values. There is a clear difference between an Amish child deciding they want to take a leave from school to pursue their education, which has good standing in the community, versus myself or Joelle or Rachel deciding we want to drop out of school and pursue our own religion today.
Right.
Those children.
Right. What if the child wants to go to school and the parents want to pull the child out? When should the child be able to make that decision as against the parents' decisions on religion and education?
I believe at any age the child should be able to choose education over not education, because the secular purpose of the Wisconsin law in keeping children in school until age 16 is very important, right? We want an educated citizenry that is knowledgeable and able to think critically and participate in our democracy effectively. And because education is highly valued in our society, at all ages, the child should be able to go away from his parents and choose education. But the decision in Yoder said that before the age of 14 or 15, the parents are not able to pull their child out at all.
Okay. Should the uneducated be allowed to exercise rights of citizenship like voting?
Yes, absolutely. We saw that literacy tests were one of the main ways in the Jim Crow era that voter suppression was carried out in the South. And all people should be able to participate in our democracy because they represent their own interests. The government should represent all people, including the uneducated, because those people have an interest in electing leaders that will look out for them and increase education and access to education for other people.
Although our framers were the people who created the Electoral College for our nation, in Federalist 51, James Madison called for more opinions, for a broader and stronger republic. I believe that this is necessary, and if we start leaving out people because they're uneducated, well, there are large discrepancies across states or even within states about education. If we look at the case in my own state, Connecticut Coalition for Funding versus REL, it looked at the 11 confounding formulas for when it comes to figuring out education funding. And when we look specifically at different towns, if we look at Darien, they have a 2.4 plus above the grades in writing, reading, and math than they need to. However, if we look at New Britain, another town that's only a few miles away, they are 2.4 grade levels below the national average. And therefore, we see that there's this wide discrepancy, and we shouldn't be able to discriminate against the people who want to make themselves better, who want to fix their government to help them.
Well, I don't think education should be required to vote. I do think it should be encouraged and pushed. Education is a right in 22 states, Connecticut being one of them. Aristotle once said that education makes the person whole. And may I finish my thought? If we encourage civic education and provide it for multiple grades and not just at the high school level, we can have more informed voters and have more people registering to vote versus even facing the issue of should they be allowed to vote.
Congratulations. Let's recognize the students for their hard work and participation this week.
All right, you can breathe. So nice job. Congratulations again. I thought the prepared remarks, not surprisingly at this stage, covered the question and provided a good answer. A wide range of supporting authority in there. I appreciated hearing Article 6. In the Northwest Ordinance, really kind of giving a fuller history than even the question necessarily called for. And likewise, I thought on the second sub-question there about how do you balance these interests, I thought beginning with Reynolds and moving right up until Fulton County, I thought that was a good history. I think Fulton County, it had some of its thunder stolen by Tandon v. Newsom and Roman Catholic Diocese, which you guys mentioned, and I was impressed with that. I mean, that decision's just a couple weeks old, and is near and dear to my heart, or the subject of my nightmares. It's a case my office is handling, and I agree with the young lady who said, it's really pushing the limits of free exercise, and I think that was what my question was getting at. Is the court protecting free exercise to such a degree that it's actually endorsing or favoring religion in a way that might violate the principles of the Lemon Test? And so I think that's a real interesting tension that's likely to be litigated in coming years. You had good use of case law. In particular, you didn't just throw out a case name. You actually told us a bit about the case and what the case held, which is important. And so I appreciated that. I don't have much to add. You worked really well as a team. Just well done overall. Congratulations.
I certainly agree with all that. The cases, it's certainly helpful to know what they actually say, right? And that was good stuff. I do agree that it's at some point, I'm sure you all have thought about this, but at some point you do want to ask, what does the Establishment Clause mean on the other side of free exercise, right? Because for those folks out there who are not religious, I think their notion is, boy, this country is really bending over backward to help the religious without bending over backward to help those folks who are not religious. So it's kind of an interesting piece of the puzzle, but you all did a lot. And of course, the obligatory jumping on the Lemon Test is absolutely necessary. So I thought that was really good stuff. But I don't have anything else to add. But nice work.
I concur with my colleagues. I thought you did an outstanding job. I particularly enjoyed your reference to Dayton, Tennessee, and the Scopes trial, being from Tennessee. But I really appreciated you understanding the sort of machinations at the Supreme Court level, from Yoder to Oregon v. Smith to the more recent case law. It showed a very nuanced understanding of the difficult balancing that's gone on through the years. I also appreciated the follow-up section. You had great teamwork and participation, and some very nuanced answers. And I just appreciate and hope that you'll continue in your study of the Constitution. And it was a real pleasure to have a conversation with you. Thank you.
All right, good luck the rest of the day.
Congratulations once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.